The following is a conversation with Jason Wojo. Jason Wojo is a Duke PhD and worked in corporate America until 2011 when he decided to quit his job because he didn't want to work for someone else. He then went into real estate and stumbled upon Lifeonaire, a business coaching organization that helped him shape the life he wants to live and helps many others do the same. In a twist of fate, Jason now serves as the CEO of Lifeonaire. Tune in to hear more about his story. So, Jason, what was your first job out of college?
So if you want to call it a job, I was a postdoctoral fellow for the Navy doing research, actually biological and chemical warfare research to be exact. But by the way, it sounds way cooler than it really was in real life.
Interesting. Sounds good. Why biological and chemical warfare? Do you want to do something in the Navy or something in like industrial engineering or I don't know if
Yes.
industrial engineering has anything to do with that, but you get the kind of vibe I'm asking.
Yeah, well, I got my doctorate degree in immunology, and I went to Duke, and a lot of the same science is kind of funny because like a lot of the same techniques and experimental procedures and the technology is utilized in different areas of science. And so this was something that sounded cool, but also built on the skills I already had developed in grad school. So I'm like, hey, this sounds kind of cool than versus just being, just a lab rat or on a desk somewhere that wasn't doing anything cool or working on something that seemed like, insignificant or boring.
Got it. Fair enough. So, okay, makes sense. So you wanted to have like an interesting job there and do something a
Yeah,
little more sciencey, but I know you ended up quitting. So, why'd you end up
right.
leaving? I'm sure everyone would love to answer that question, but they can't do so in their normal lives. But you're in the position where you can speak freely about that. So, why
Yeah.
did you end up quitting corporate America?
So technically, so a postdoc is typically a term arrangement. And so I had a 2-year commitment to them. And I didn't want to break that because like one thing that I'm pretty strong about is like my word being my bond kind of thing. And so I didn't want to break that. And so what I realized is that I'm going to finish out the 2-year term. I was not going to renew. I was offered a position in tech transfer, which is
Mhm.
essentially kind of like the business of taking the inventions and the developments that you've done scientifically and bringing them to market. And while that also sounded cool, it didn't allow me to kind of pursue my own path. And so like when I finished that 2 years, I realized like that was going to be my 2 years. And then by then that was my launch point. Like, so I had my deadline as to when I had to have my own stuff, all my ducks in a row to make that leap.
Mhm. Got it. So it sounds like nothing was kind of set up strategically, and you knew you didn't want to like still work for someone else or under the lines of corporate America. So that's why ultimately you made that leap.
Yeah, man. And listen, I am not one to cast judgment or throw stones. Like some people really do love their job, what they do. And for me, if I wanted to live the life that I envisioned, it didn't include having a job working for somebody else. And so I know that not like everybody has a different vision for their life. Everybody has different goals and ambitions. And for me, I had to kind of go out on my own to have that freedom. And some people can live the life they want and still have a job, and that's awesome. That just wasn't my case.
Got it. Fair enough. I think I really respect that point of view. I think that a lot of people, it's easy to judge others. Obviously, it's the worst thing we could do, and we got to kind of try to introspect. But for those that love corporate America, by all means. But I think some people just have a natural inhibition or kind of natural characteristics that guide them towards the doing your own thing kind of life path. So definitely
Yeah.
interesting to resonate there. So the one thing that you did do after that was go into real estate. Why'd you end up doing real estate as opposed to kind of running the show in another industry?
So I didn't have. So it's interesting because well, first of all, let me say that when I wanted to leave and I didn't want to have a job anymore, that was very foreign to me because like all I was ever taught was like a job is your only option. Like I didn't have any entrepreneurs. I had no business owners in my family. My dad, when I was a kid, I found a bunch of for sale real estate signs in the basement that he never put out. So he maybe at some point he had some entrepreneurial dreams that just died, and he was an accountant, and so he never did it. And so the reason I chose real estate was because I realized like, okay, I have no business experience. I don't
Mhm.
know anything about business. And real estate was something at least I'm like, okay, how hard can it be? Like it's kind of tangible. It's a house. Like, it seemed like a logical, easy first step that didn't require necessarily to be a business owner and know about all this kind of stuff. Now, as I found out later, like you're still a business owner when you're a real estate investor, but at least on the surface, it seemed like that was something I could wrap my head around.
Mhm. Was it as easy as it looked, or what would you say about that?
No, it was not. So one of the things, and I can't say this is true for every industry, but in the real estate industry, there's a lot of educational promotion. Like, so there's real estate investment groups all over the country. And a lot of times they'll have, you might consider them to be, call themselves gurus who come in and sell courses and educational products and boot camps and those kinds of things. And there's value there and they're good. But I think the general tendency is for these gurus to make it seem a little bit easier than it really is. And I get it. They have something to sell, but it was definitely much, much more challenging than I thought it would be. And so, I think that's probably true for almost everything. Like, I don't know if it's, even when I say I'm going to do something, clean my house, and I say it's going to take an hour, everything takes longer and is harder than you think it's going to be. And so I wasn't fully prepared for it. But the one thing I did have going for me is like, I'm just going to keep going until I make this thing happen. And so that's what ended up occurring in my life.
Got it. Fair enough. What do you think the biggest, I think you spoke about it earlier, but what do you think the biggest challenges were kind of running your own thing, especially within real estate and having to learn really the ropes of, on the surface, what seems like simple, but deep down, there's probably a lot of moving parts to figure out.
There's a few things. I think there's multiple components to being successful in business. And you have everything from, the first thing you encounter, like for instance, when you go into business for yourself, is controlling your time. And, are you disciplined? Are you going to get the work done that you need to get done versus now you have nobody looking over your shoulder to tell you you should be doing this or keeping you accountable. There's no deadlines per se. So you got to have the self-discipline to do the things and manage your time effectively. But then you also have this component of business, which is like, there's a lot, like you gotta understand and find a balance between working in the business itself and working on the business. You got to start thinking like in the future, but also in the present. You got to start understanding like, what are the key components to my particular industry and my niche, and do market research and develop those skills and make the connections. So there's a lot of things that are involved, but it's, and everyone has natural talents. And so what you really got to start to understand is like, if you're going to run a business, you have to really, the easiest suggestion I would be is like, find somebody else who's already done it and who can mentor you or guide you or coach you, because it just cuts a lot of time off your learning curve. Because like when I first started, like I didn't know what I didn't know. Like I made a lot of mistakes that I had no idea would even come back to bite me. Like I didn't know, for instance, one of my projects, I was flipping houses. I never knew that I should do a final inspection prior to closing. So I had gone out to this property weeks earlier. Hey, this looks great. I made this offer. It got accepted. And then I closed on it. And then I go back and I realized that the HVAC unit, the air conditioning, the heater had all been stolen. And I'm like, wow, if I would have caught this before I closed on it, I probably could have renegotiated. Now I got to pay. So I've made so many mistakes like that because I just didn't know, so it's kind of like there's multiple things you got to think about.
Yep, for sure. Devil's always in the details. And I think now, if there's any lesson learned, at least anyone else listening who's trying to get into real estate, always get an independent inspection before buying a property. For sure. So another thing, which you're actually the CEO now, and I'm sure kind of has had a significant influence on your life, is Lifeonaire. So before we get into all the fancy stuff around that, can you speak a little bit about what Lifeonaire is?
So Lifeonaire is actually, it's think of the word millionaire except the life. And the reason why I'm so passionate about this, and this is what I do predominantly now, is that it allows for business owners to have both a life and a business they love. And so here's a mistake, especially when you're, well, frankly, at every stage of business development, because like when you're first starting off, you're probably working a whole lot and life can get the leftovers. Life kind of gets like like the crumbs. And then as you build your business, if you're not careful, you'll become kind of consumed by your business, and it becomes kind of your one thing. And again, your family, your health, all these other parts of your life kind of take the back seat. And especially as you scale and you get more successful, now you've kind of many times built a monster that requires, food, and you got to continually work in the business. And so the whole MO of Lifeonaire is like, how do you number one, put together what you want your life to really look like in a tangible way, but then also like, how do you truthfully and and practically create a business that can support that life without you working, 60, 80 plus hours a week. And so that's like, that is what Lifeonaire is really like how to help people design, a life they love and a business they love.
Got it. So, what do you think, working with Lifeonaire, is there a one size fits all? Like you try to work with a different variety of different kinds of businesses, or you predominantly target like one or two different industries where people can build
So
these businesses?
yeah, we are real estate investor heavy, but not exclusive. And when I say heavy, I mean either people that their primary business is real estate, and realize also real estate is a very diverse industry. So for instance, we have people that do short-term rentals like Airbnb. We have people that flip. We have people that have apartments. We have people that have storage facilities that will do mortgages and notes and private lending. There's so many different aspects of real estate.
Mhm.
And so a lot of our people either will have a business directly in real estate, or they will take proceeds, for instance, from their W-2 job for those who want to keep it, or they'll take proceeds from their business and buy real estate as an asset-based, diversification move, so that all of their business, all their eggs aren't in one basket, and so they have income streams from multiple sources. Now, with that being said, we probably have 20% of people that have nothing to do with real estate. We have people. I'm thinking of a guy right now who has a yacht management company. We have another guy who has a power washing company. We have retail people. We have e-learning, e-commerce businesses. So I'd say we're real estate heavy, but definitely not exclusive.
Got it. So, say for example, someone comes to you guys with a yacht business. Love that you guys brought that up. So, what kind of practical advice would you give to him or her, and to how they can kind of most efficiently run their business, but also have kind of that time left over to, pun intended, be a life in air?
Yeah. So the guy, I'll use the example of the yacht management guy. So this is a particular example. His name is Bill. And he came into the program, didn't really have a clear vision of what he wanted his life to look like. He only knew that he was working too much. So the part that he was doing in his company in particular was he was the one kind of driving the boat. He was the one who was scheduling all the clients. He was the one who was doing all the marketing. He's down in Naples, Florida. And so he's doing all of the work, like all the admin, all the hands-on stuff. He's dealing with the customer and client relations. He's doing, when they're done with the boat, he's the one who coordinates all the clean and gets the teams. And so in his case, it was really two parts. And I would say in 90% of cases, if you mentioned cookie cutter, there are two places where I see most people fall down. And the first part is oftentimes they don't really have a very, very clear, tangible picture of what they want their life to look like, which hurts them because number one, it doesn't give you a definition for winning. It doesn't give you a goal. But number two, what I found is that, like, if you don't have something that you want to experience in your life, you're just going to work because you have the available time, because you don't have something else you'd rather be doing.
Mhm.
And so you're like, well, I'm good at work. I'm making money. I may as well work. And so that vision is one of the most common mistakes I see people make. The second part, and this plays into the example I just gave you with Bill, is that many business owners, and listen, I did this too, so there's no judgment here. Most business owners just they really own a job. They don't own a business. And so in this case, for instance, he was doing all these different things and he started to wonder, hey, I can't scale. I can't grow. I'm already running around with my hair on fire constantly. And so you have to make the transition from business operator to business owner. And that means delegating. That means building systems. That means having processes. This means, eliminating the things that aren't really serving the business. And so that's the other cookie cutter, I guess you could say, thing that we see so frequently that we've actually this is a big initiative within Lifeonaire, is how do you pull yourself out of your business?
Yep, fair enough. I think a lot of times business owners, they might have fear or kind of lack of faith when it comes to letting other people make decisions or delegating kind of decision-making tasks. How would you say that you're able to
Sure.
kind of ease that fear and, let them know that, hey, this is part of growing a brand and part of growing, and, this is what it takes if you really want to, build a business to live your life and be a life in air?
So that's a great question. And there's actually another component of it that I didn't fully understand early on. So you have the fear for sure. And a lot of that fear is I don't want to turn over the keys. No one does it as good as I can. You can't trust people. Nobody wants to work. We all have these beliefs, right? But one way to overcome that fear. Oh, here's another one. I won't be able to, I can't afford to bring somebody on. That's another very, very common one. And so one of the ways to overcome that fear is to realize, number one, what is the likely outcome for you as a business owner if you don't bring someone on in another 3, 5, 10 years, what will that look like for you if you're still doing all the things you're doing now? And how does that feel? And then use that feeling. Are you more scared of that, or are you more scared of taking a chance on somebody else, of someone else going in there? And so when you compare those and contrast those two levels of fear, most people will realize, like, man, if I don't do this, here's almost my guaranteed goal, my guaranteed consequence rather, versus taking a chance to hire somebody. The other thing, like practically speaking, is when you bring somebody on, and I talk a lot about this because it's a very, very common mistake. A lot of people think that because they're good at swinging a hammer or being the technician, that they are good in attracting, in finding, in hiring, in screening, and training, and leading those people as well. And that's just not true. It's a different skill set. And so until you understand that, and by the way, if you think it's the same skill set, you're going to be disappointed, and you're going to have a bad experience with this person. And you're going to say, see, I told you so. You can't trust anybody, nobody. And you just reinforce your own belief pattern instead of realizing, like, I'm at fault. It's my lack of skills and abilities that resulted in this poor experience. And so that's one huge thing to really wrap your mind around. The other thing, quite frankly, aside from fear, is well, it's kind of related to fear as well, is ego. Like, some people really like to feel like they are the puppet master, like they're calling all the shots, they're the one who's needed, they're required. They want to be the man or the woman in your business. And if that's true, you are creating something that is a deck of cards or a set of dominoes that, like, if you aren't able to work, or if there's a bottleneck, it is you. And so you got to get over that. Now, to your point, some of that is fear. Like, who am I without work? What is my value outside of my job? And, like, there's some fear there as well, but the identity part has to shift alongside with the actual skill set of building a business and building a team.
Got it. And I think it's a really valid point, and kind of another practical example. What would you say, or one, how did you first hear of Lifeonaire, and really, what would you say that the influence it has had on your life has been?
Yeah, so I started off as a member in Lifeonaire as a student in 2009. I had already heard of Steve Cook, who's the founder, because he was a real estate investor, and he's one of the guys that I started looking up to when I had first begun my investment attempts and my journey. And so I already had some experience knowing him, and I had already bought his course, and I ran into him at a property auction once, and it's super funny. It's super embarrassing, but I was like totally geeked out by him. I'm like, cause he was a nationally known guy, and I went up and introduced myself. And then shortly thereafter, we struck up a conversation. He invited me into the program. And so I started off in 2009. And so for me, I can't imagine where my life or my business would be without Lifeonaire, because what it's essentially allowed me to do is avert all of the consequences and all of the mistakes of putting business first and life second. But that wasn't until after I had suffered some of my own losses. So, for instance, like I went through a divorce, and I had a ton of debt, and I have the crash and burn story, but Lifeonaire is what allowed me to kind of really make sure that I didn't repeat that, and that didn't allow me to continue to go down this path and suffer those consequences. So, like, I feel super blessed, frankly, to have come into contact with Lifeonaire. Now, like, I get to run the company, and I get to share this message. I get to speak all over the country and see those same things happen for other people. So when I can help somebody else, avert or avoid a marriage breakup, or a problem with their family, or get them out of working like 60-hour weeks, and I can show them how to cut back to 20 or 30, like, it's awesome. Like, I'm living my vision by helping other people live theirs.
Got it. I love the way you finished that. You get to live your life by helping other people helping other people build theirs. I think at the end of the day, a lot of us are just trying to be happy, and if you can kind of do your thing while helping everyone else do their thing, I think that's what really makes it worthwhile. On a similar note, to kind of when you approach Lifeonaire, you said you were kind of going through some of these difficulties, and now you're able to kind of advise folks. So for anyone out there that are going through similar practical difficulties, whether they're struggling with personal relationships or work-life balance, or maybe financial issues, what's the biggest piece of advice you would give them to kind of transition their lives?
Man, the two things. The first thing is, like, just realize, first of all, do not give up. Do not give up. Don't throw in the towel. Don't think you have to make a decision about like, hey, I have to have either this or that. Like, I don't believe in like, like a dichotomy of choice. And so have hope for a better thing that awaits you, a better future, a better image of that. But also you got to really step back and really understand what is most important to you so that you'll have the reason why you have to make it work. Like, so, this is a mistake I see many people make, is like they're going through these challenges because they've misprioritized their life, because they haven't identified the things that are most important to them. Mm-hmm. And so fight for the things that are most important to you and prioritize those things. So like, for instance, if health is super important to you and you're a donut away from a heart attack, you gotta prioritize work and then figure out a way to make it happen. So I just did an awesome, we have our podcast, Lifeonaire show, and we just did an awesome interview with this guy he's 60, I think 60 now. And he was saying like and he runs a huge company. He has, it's 50 plus employees, multi-million-dollar business. And he said, I wanted to start taking off Mondays for me. And he's like, I tried to work my way to freedom and it doesn't work. You got to just decide this is important to you, put it on there, commit to it, decide you're going to do it, and then you figure out how to make it happen. And so for somebody who's struggling, to your point, they're struggling in their relationship, they're struggling in their life and their personal health or whatever, you got to decide this is a priority and you're going to do whatever it takes to make that, to improve that and get it in alignment with what you want it to be. And then that's the first choice, is to actually decide. I know it sounds simple, it sounds oversimplistic, but it's true. All of us know how to get in shape, but until you decide that you're actually going to get in shape, most people don't do that.
Yep, definitely agree with you on that point. I think a lot of times, a lot of us say we don't know, but deep down inside our conscious is a lot smarter than we give it credit for. We know what to do. I think a lot of times people have this fear, this worry that it's not going to work out, but I agree with you in the sense that sometimes you just have to kind of decide, be strict about something, know where your values align, and then just like figure things out around that. And then if you have confidence and uncertainty, things will one way or another end up shaping out. So really great note on that. A few of the fun questions I wanted to ask, which I think you'll really enjoy as well. And this one I think is really will really resonate. But if you could give advice to your 10-year-old self, what would it be and why?
To my 10-year-old self would be just never stop having fun. I think, man, I look around, we do our live events and I'll see people that look like they've had the life sucked out of them because they create lives of, we call it this adulting thing. Like, so you're a lot younger than I am. But I see people that like, they're just trying to get through life. They're just trying to like put their head down, put their shoulder down. They're looking for their 2 weeks vacation every year and their 3% raise every year. And like, that is just so far beyond what like is really what's possible and what's out there. And like, so never stop having fun, never lose that curiosity, never lose that joy, the hope, just a spirit of like, let's have some fun here, because that I think is so important.
God, I also think it's important. I think a lot of times if you're enjoying yourself, you age a lot slower and you can enjoy.
Yeah.
Well, not that aging's a bad thing. We all get smarter as we get older, but you get to enjoy life a lot more and stay young mentally. So really great note on that.
And let me also say this, like, so how old are you?
I'm 24.
Yeah, so I'm 50. And so
great for 50, by the way.
well, thanks, man. And so, but here's the thing is like, yes, things change as you get older and you absolutely should be getting more wise but life shouldn't get heavier like as you get older. It shouldn't yet. And I know things happen in life and people start dying as you get older and older, but like you got to maintain that childlike curiosity and joy, because to your point, you just age so much quicker if you don't.
That's a fact. Hopefully we can all make that decision. Obviously, sometimes things happen, but
yeah.
I think a lot of times for those that didn't make that decision, one of the biggest regrets or kind of regrets of dying people is, I wish I stressed less. I wish I had more fun. So hopefully some people choose not to take that lesson, but hopefully we can all take that lesson and kind of move forward with our lives. So definitely a great note on that. I see a lot of books in the background. So I would love to know what your favorite book is and why.
Man, so you'd have to give me a specific topic. Like, so for instance, by topic I have, for instance, like leadership, one of my favorite books is Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. If you want to talk about, marketing, we might talk about something by Dan Kennedy in one of his No BS series, or Expert Secrets by Russell Brunson. If you want to talk about, you know what I mean? Like, so it's a little bit harder to give a favorite. My favorite book ever is the Bible, but that's not necessarily, I think, where you're going. And so if you had a topic, I love reading. Yep. And, my wife, by the way, only half of these things are read behind me. And the reason is, and my wife's like, why do you keep buying books? It's like, because I know when I need to know something, that speed of implementation is so important. So I want to be able to pick up a book and read it right then and there, because like I don't even want to wait 2 days for Amazon Prime. So I'm constantly learning. And so, yeah, I'd say, Extreme Ownership is great, because that's a book that applies to real life. Crucial Conversations is a fantastic book in dealing with people. Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, is great for just general socialization, and learning how to like interact with folks. Another fantastic book, Robert Cialdini, Influence, fantastic book. Those are probably some of the more influential books in my library thus far that are coming to mind right now.
Got it. So on that note, I'll break it down into 2 categories. What's your favorite business book in general? Or if you need to break it down further than that, happy to, but on that note.
Overall business, I would have to say probably Traction, most likely. Traction, EOS, Wickham, Willing. No, wait, what is it? Wickham, I think.
Got it. Well, so what's Traction about?
So it's about something called EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, and there's 6 components that he talks about in terms of of running a successful business. So he'll have people, systems. He'll have each different component of business in a very simple way that is really relevant for small entrepreneurial businesses to run. And so it's basically a way to kind of do everything from the people component to the data component to each of the, and I don't remember all the 6, quite frankly, but there's like each of these is valuable. I'd say that book. A close second would be The E-Myth by Michael Gerber, which is essentially what we just talked about before, which is like, the difference between being a technician, and he breaks it into three stages, but there's technician, like a manager, and then kind of the entrepreneur, the business owner. That's probably a close second for an overall favorite business book.
Okay, fair. What's your favorite narrative or favorite story that you've ever
read? Favorite story ever would probably either be The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, or I'm not sure how to pronounce the second name.
Coelho, one of those things.
Coelho, yeah, that's probably. Or I'll tell you, man, this is going to sound super hilarious, but there are a few children's books that I love because of I don't want to say deceitfulness nature of it, but the deceitfulness nature of these books in terms of like the adult lessons that they teach that are also kid friendly. So for instance, there's a book called Dooley and the Snort Snoot. And it's a lesson about courage. There's another book about There Is No Dragon, which talks, and Jordan Peterson talks about this book. This is fantastic. I love the book of The Sorcerer's Apprentice, where it's basically, to me, I take it as a business automation book, like in terms of the story behind it. So I learn lessons for business, like The Tortoise and the Hare. Like, listen, they're so simple, and I know they're like, people, your listeners are probably like, okay, like what? Like, children, listen, the lessons in these books are so profound and so simple, and they're told as stories, which everybody likes, right? But you can extrapolate these incredible lessons that are just so true in real life, not just when you're 8 years old.
It reminds me of a lesson or kind of a lecture that I had in school one time in this one entrepreneurship class. I don't know if you've ever heard of this exercise, but they give you like sticks and pieces of tape. Does that sound familiar at all?
No, what's that?
So basically they give you, if I remember correctly, they give you like, I think 10 or 12 pieces of spaghetti, or like kind of like really thin sticks, and like, a roll of tape. And basically the task is to build something to, as high as you can have it so that it's stable. And statistically, the people that do this best are build the high structure engineers, which is like understandable, that's their bread and butter. But in second place usually comes, kindergartners or people in grade school. And then after that comes like business students. So the idea is that like business students, the way schools or the way people teach classes now is that everything has to be so defined, everything has to be so strict. But in order to build like the highest structure, you have to get really creative, and unless you're an expert in it, you have to really play around with a lot of things. So I think the funny example here is that, like, the younger you are, the more you're willing to experiment. So a lot of times when
Right.
you're younger, big lessons learned in that.
So true. That's a great point.
Yeah, it's a really, really fun exercise. Another fun question I have here: if you could have dinner with anyone else, in the world, whether dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Oh, for sure. For me, it would be Jesus.
Mm.
And there's, a number of reasons for that, but that if for a dead person, individual, no longer currently here on earth, would be Jesus. Alive would probably be Tony Robbins.
Mm.
I would say most likely. This is a funny story. So like literally a month, maybe 2 months ago, I was given a VIP dinner opportunity with John Maxwell, and it was free, and I was invited to go, but I had monster trucks already booked with my kids, and so that was a moment of vision testing for me. Like, if I say my kids are most important to me, what am I really willing to do? And so I gave up the dinner with John Maxwell. I was also given an opportunity to go to Necker Island and have a day with Richard Branson. And it was $20,000. It was not nothing, but the money wasn't the issue. But I looked at my schedule, and I had things that I didn't want to move around because it was important to me, and so I gave that up too. So like, those are the kinds of weird kind of things that kind of come your way, but it's really a test for you to see like what's most valuable to you, But it'd probably be Tony Robbins, because that would be really cool to him. Or let's see, if it wasn't Tony, maybe a second choice would probably be like Jordan Peterson. That'd be kind of cool too. I'd enjoy that.
Yeah, I think he's a legendary guy. I would love to have dinner with him too, and would learn a ton of lessons. What do you think some of the questions you would ask them would be? Specifically, I might be a little biased here. Maybe it's the most practical example, but Jordan, what do you think the most important questions would be to ask him?
So, man, I did have a chance to attend a VIP session with him. There was like, 20, 30 of us in a room with him, but I didn't get one-on-one time with him, which would have been cool. So for him, I'm fascinated about his beliefs around not only personal responsibility, but also his transparency in terms of saying things that he believes to be true and that are not culturally acceptable, like because of the world we live in, where he believes, and based on, and I think Jordan's very objective, and I don't believe he has any kind of particular agenda, any kind of personal reason for the things he says, other than he believes that he should share the truth. And so I admire that greatly. And so I'd want to know from him, like, what has that been like, and how have you continued to share these things amidst the controversy? How have you choose to focus your attention? Like, how do you continue to stay involved and not feel isolated as you kind of gain status? I'd like to know about some of the things in terms of, his own lessons for personal responsibility, and he has his 2 books, his rules for living, that I'd love to kind of dive into those a little bit deeper than he had in the book, and also hear about some of the examples that he's experienced on his own regarding those principles.
I have a personal theory. I definitely know Jordan Peterson, or kind of psychologist wizard here, but I think that we all inherently know kind of what the truth is, or kind of what, being objective and right is. And I think that a lot of times what he says, some people are happy, some people get pissed off because they secretly know he's right. They just don't admit it. So interesting.
I agree with that, man. And that's what he is. He's polarized people, but I believe, to your point, the people that have a challenge with him, either one, know it's correct, or number two, don't want to admit it's correct. And so, and I think this is a little bit off topic, but I think what I've learned from him and others is that when you polarize or automatically dismiss or don't listen, you lose the opportunity to grow and to improve. And so the more you can hear people that you disagree with and learn something from and openly try to understand them, it's such a valuable skill. Like, and so I'm curious also to how he's allowed himself to kind of not become polarized himself and become bitter and become like, hurt and and negative. And so like, I think that's a missing. So for instance, I'll give you an example. And this is not a super big example, but like, for instance, I'm not a big Barry Sanders, not Barry Sanders. I'm thinking Barry Sanders, a football player.
Yep.
What's his name? The
Deion
politician.
Sanders? Oh, no,
No,
no.
the politician.
Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders.
Bernie Sanders. Yeah, I was thinking Barry Sanders was the running back. Bernie Sanders.
Similar.
I'm not a super big fan of his political agenda and his policies and some of the things I've heard, but I realized, you know what? I don't know if I've fairly judged this guy because I haven't gone through all of his stuff. I'm seeing these 2-second sound bites. And so I did some research on him and I watched interviews with him. He was on the Joe Rogan podcast. And so like I'm watching, I'm learning, I'm watching, and it did substantiate that I don't agree with a lot of his things. And I think they're overly idyllic and simplistic and aren't well thought out. But I also looked at a guy and I'm like, you know what? He seems like he'd be a super cool grandpa. And he seems like he's a nice guy. Like he really, I think he does want the best for people. And so it just being able to kind of like not get polarized by things that are different from what you believe and learn about them. And this goes for on both sides, on all sides of the table. It allows us to be human and it allows us to connect better and it allows us to grow more and be more compassionate, understanding and empathetic. So there's no downside. And you can be free to disagree with those things, but you are doing yourself a disservice if you don't have the full picture. And so that's one thing that's kind of, I know we kind of just went on a total tangent there, but
all good.
Yeah, it's valuable.
I mean, look, what makes these podcasts good is when we go on those tangents and we kind of just shoot the shit. So no worries on that. But I definitely agree with you on that point. I think, personally, I disagree with some of his fundamental stuff as well. But I think that a lot of the times, if you look at the intention behind it, it seems like a nice person, and while we might disagree with a lot of his policies, if you understand the person behind it, I think it helps you grow a little bit as an individual. So I definitely think it's a very valid point there for sure. One of the other final two things I wanted to bring up, and I'm sure this is kind of may sound like a loaded question, but I want you to answer it as simple as possible. What would you say brings you just pure happiness in life?
Man, I'd say for me, it's mostly a few things. My family is definitely like front and center, and that's one huge thing for me. I love being able to impact other people. Like I get a lot of joy from helping other people. Like there's a point in life where another stake, another 10 grand, 50 grand in your bank account, it doesn't mean anything. You don't feel any different. But when you can help somebody else raise their standard of their life and they grow and they mature and you can help them live awesome lives, and then they go and do that, it's even better. And so like I'd say impact with other people, my family. I love the feeling. You could say I'm even, maybe like I love business. I love that as well. Man, my life is a lot of get tos, not a lot of have tos. And I'd say those are some of the things I love. Like, I mean, I have hobbies, of course, and stuff too that I enjoy tremendously, but I don't know if I'd say full joy. Like I can sit down and play guitar for 4 hours and I look up and I'm like, oh my gosh, like what just happened? Like I thought it was like a half hour. So those kinds of things I have in my life. But yeah, I'd say mostly it's related to like my family and impacting others.
Okay, I think that's a very beautiful answer. On that note, you've been able to impact a lot of lives, have had your life impacted by Lifeonaire. Is there anything else you want to share, whether it's relationship advice, life advice, business advice, fun advice? The final word is yours, Jason.
Yeah, man. The biggest thing I think that people would benefit from is really taking the time to very tangibly figure out what they want their life to look like. And this is something that it seems so obvious, but when I ask people what they want their life to look like, they'll oftentimes say stuff like, oh, well, I want a 3,000 square foot house and I want my kids' college fund fully, paid for. And I'm like, hold on, you're telling me about your balance sheet. I want to hear about your life. And, I want to take a vacation a couple times a year. I'm like, okay, cool. Where would you go? And they're like, and it just becomes very obvious. They've never really spent the time to figure out what that looks like in a very concrete, clear way. So I think that's the absolute first step for everybody. And then from there, then you can start worrying about the how. But you got to get the what and the why first. The how is later. And so I'd say that is the most important thing that I could tell anybody is take that time to figure that out, because it actually impacts every part of your life. Like, so how you set up your business will be directly impacted by how you structure your life. So if you say you figure out that you want to travel, 6 months a year internationally, well, your business has to take that into consideration. You have to structure it very specifically to allow you to do that. And so, but it all starts with life. And like, so that's where business planning actually starts with your life. Even as weird and ridiculous as that sounds, it actually starts with your life. So that'd be my number one piece of advice for people.
Yep, I definitely agree with you on that point. I think you got to get really defined where you're trying to go, and while that path may be uncertain, you have to be kind of have confidence in the uncertainty, and then take things step by step. And then, if you're relatively realistic over 5, 10 years, if you just kind of keep at it, I think people will be amazed with what they can achieve. But Jason, really appreciate the final word, and thanks so much for taking the time to go on the show.
Appreciate it, man. I love what you're doing.
Thanks for listening to my conversation with Jason Wojo. If you enjoyed the episode, rate the show on Spotify, drop a comment on YouTube, and subscribe.